paper I presented at the Istanbul seminars in 2009 was about the relation between the secular and religious, especially in the Muslim world, but also somehow about how the religious and the secular, they can have this dialogue in the world today. I did emphasize on the fact that, especially in the Middle East, in the past 100 years, we've been going from authoritarian traditionalism to authoritarian secularism, and again back to authoritarian traditionalism. And the examples which I gave in my paper was that, for example, in the beginning of the 20th century, we had the two experiences of Kemalism and the first and second Pahlavi regime in Iran, which took the model of the French Revolution and French laïcité, and it ended up by pushing out of the public space, religion out of the public space. Now, of course, for going back to the authoritarian traditionalism, we have examples of Iranian theocracy, we have the examples of Taliban in Afghanistan, we have the examples of Muslim fundamentalism in Egypt or elsewhere in the Middle East. And my point was that if we have a dual critique of Muslim revivalism or fundamentalism, what we call it fundamentalism, and at the same time secular authoritarianism, we do not need to go back again to the French model, which is in crisis itself in Europe, but we can probably go to the Indian model, which was a model of a more harmonious model, a more dialogical model of, let's say, which was practiced by people like Gandhi and Nehru and Maulana Azad and Abdul Ghaffar Khan during the independent movement in India. And it ended up with the Indian Constitution in the late 1940s, early 1950s. And it helped, without having one state religion, it helped religion to be present in the public space while not be fundamentalist. Now, I think that I have a very optimistic view on the post-Islamist movements like the AKP in Turkey, or the civil society in Iran and the reformist groups in Iran, or what might be happening among democratic groups in Egypt or elsewhere in the Muslim world, because I do think that 30 years after the Iranian Revolution, we are somehow exiting the form of fundamentalism, both in the foreign policy and in the internal policies of different countries, I would say, because there are a younger generation of Muslims around the world, especially in the Middle East, who are experimenting somehow the idea of secular at the level of the laws and regulations, so and especially at the level of human rights. So they want to somehow practice in the framework of human rights, but at the same time not exit from religion. So this might have a positive outcome, because it means that we might get, like in Turkey, to democratic debates, democratic elections, but at the same time we might have political parties with religious backgrounds, and they are not they do not get out. I think that Muslim fundamentalism in general around the Middle East is somehow in decline, because, and this is why some people have correctly used the word post-Islamism, because it means that though we have Islamist groups, some of them, they are changing their agendas. Now it shows us that we can go towards new formulations of politics, while we can have some religious groups or people with religious thinking next to the secular thinking, but they come in a new framework, and this new framework could be nationalist framework again, it could be a framework of human rights, or it could be a framework of just political, let's say, sovereignty, and or more of a global, I would say, identity. Now, it's very important to understand this, and my comparison with the Soviet regime was that somehow the Soviet system also, not just in Soviet Union, but also in Eastern Europe, it had a point where it had an ideological deficit, and people started not believing anymore in the ideology, and there was a younger generation, and there were let's say global changes economically and politically, so it went towards its own deficit and its own downfall at some point without any foreign intervention. I've always been against any foreign interventions in Muslim or theocratic or Muslim, let's say, regimes today in the Middle East, but because I think that the outcome will not be democratization and democracy as, for example, the Bush administration fought or the neocons in America fought, but it's going to be exactly the opposite. It's going to help the rise of fundamentalism. So the best way actually to get to the decline of any dogmatic views, either secular or religious, and to not help the rise of fundamentalism in the Middle East is dialogue, is the dialogical view. And somehow post-Islamism has in its own nature to enter the dialogue with the secular, otherwise it would not have been post-Islamist. Religion is not always about authority of texts, and religion is not always about dogmatism, and religion is not always about organized church. This is wrong to talk about religion in these terms. I think religion is also about spirituality. And there is one point which I brought up in my paper, which is the idea of spiritualization of politics, which was put forward by Gandhi. And it meant somehow that you might bring again spirituality into the public sphere, but on pluralist level, and at this level you bring in ethics also into the society. So the spiritual is actually the ethical, and the religious is not necessarily the political theology, but it would be more of an ethical stand. So I think that in today's world, even in Europe, if people turn towards religion, it's because of its spirituality, it's not because of its theological doctrine, you know. Now, fundamentalists usually are not interested in spirituality at all, you know. They are mostly interested in the ideologization of religion. And we have to distinguish, as Gandhi used to distinguish between the politicization or ideologization of religion from the spiritualization of politics. Spiritualizing politics does not mean that you would necessarily politicize religion or you want somehow to make an ideology out of religion. It just means that you want, through the spirituality, bring some new ethics or ethical virtues or ethical ideas into politics, which we always need. For example, in today's world, we lack a lot of moral voices, you know. We have some moral voices, but they are very old, and some of them have passed away, and some of them are very old, and like Mandela, like Dalai Lama. All these, or like Desmond Tutu, all these people from different religions, they had this spiritual force behind them. You know, it's not just pragmatic politics that we see in Europe. Is not utilitarian politics. It's more than that. And I think that spirituality speaks to people today in different parts of Europe, Africa, Middle East, Asia, and because, well, people need this metaphysical side also to politics, and they just cannot see politics as something which is raw and without depth, you know.